Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. I'm really excited to kind of talk about all of the things surrounding, the real movement that we've seen with vulnerability disclosure and how it affects what we see with the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. And Leonard, with your position as special counsel inside the DOJ, concentrating on the CFAA, the DOJ really pushed forward. Earlier this year in August, you announced at DEF CON the Department of Justice was releasing a vulnerability disclosure guide. I would love to hear the updates and the feedback that you've been getting since you've released this in August.
Sure, thank you, Greg. So briefly, in July at DEF CON, we released a document entitled The Framework for Vulnerability Disclosure Program for Online Systems. It was released through the Criminal Division's Cybersecurity Unit, and one quick word on the Cybersecurity Unit. It was created in December of 2014 as a way of tapping the expertise and knowledge that prosecutors in the computer crime and intellectual property section had gained from handling cybercrime cases and channeling that into preventing cybercrime by working with the private sector. So the cybersecurity unit was doing a lot of outreach, and one thing it learned was that vulnerability disclosure programs were gaining traction. When you have companies like eBay and Twitter and Microsoft and Facebook reportedly to the tune of $5 million over 5 years for bug bounty programs, investing in these programs, it signals to us and others that these programs have merit, and there's reasons to look at expanding them. So we produced some guidance with the intent of spurring further growth in ways that we thought would be productive. So what does the framework do? The Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, many of you are probably familiar with it, it essentially prohibits accessing a computer without authorization or in excess of authorization. What the framework does is, without prescribing any particular form that a vulnerability disclosure program must take, identifies and frames questions that a vulnerability disclosure policy should seek to answer to ensure that network owners and the researchers / white hat hackers who will be acting under that policy have a common agreement about what is authorized, how they may scan, manipulate, access a computer network, with the goal of decreasing opportunities for disagreement that may result in litigation where they come to the department and ask for a prosecution, or a company seeks to initiate civil action.
Great. So, Casey, Martin, based off of that and based on what your companies have been doing with bug bounty programs, how can we incentivize the security researchers and just the overall cybersecurity community that is out there poking around on these systems lawfully now? How can we make sure that they follow the roadmaps that we have set up, whether it's through what the Department of Justice has set up or through the programs that your companies set up?
I think the first thing is to put a decent amount of effort in up front, going to the DOJ website, looking at this document, having conversations with companies like Marten's and mine, and really being as proactive as possible about setting up clear expectations and clear incentives, clear channels for the researchers to understand and to follow as they do this type of research. The golden rule for a vulnerability disclosure or a bug bounty program is to make sure that the expectations are as aligned as possible between the two parties up front before you commence. And I think the whole idea of crawl, walk, run, start small, understand how it works, and then iterate over time, that's really the right way to approach it, and prevents a lot of these potential issues that we're trying to head off at the pass here.
So I would start by saying that white hat hackers nearly always are among the kindest, most well-intended people you can find. So maybe they're impatient, maybe they don't speak eloquently, maybe they are difficult to deal with on a transactional base, but they have the best in mind. So giving them the rules is actually not a big job. What we do is we create the social graph around them. We track the reports they send, how they behave, how they communicate. And they build up their presence in the industry through the profile we make. And at any given time, even if they would have a temptation to maybe prematurely disclose something, they look at everything they've done and all they've achieved, and they know that all of that is at stake if they violate the rule. So they don't violate the rules much. We have many more customers who violate the rules by being unresponsive or not paying the bounties they promised. So the problem when you operate the largest network of white hat hackers is not on the hacker side. It's getting corporations and agencies to do it the right way.
So let's build upon that, because what can we be doing more to educate companies that, want to get into these programs but aren't responsive or aren't following the rules that are set up, whether it is through a legal framework or the framework by which your company set it up?
Just follow the recommendations from the FTC, from the FCC, from DOJ, from the Pentagon. They are all saying you're negligent if you do not listen to the outside world for security input. And we have given it a complex word, vulnerability disclosure policy, but it's nothing more than see something, say something. Anybody can do it.
Completely agree. I think that sums it up well.
And Leonard, I'm interested to hear whether you have any companies that have come to the DOJ, whether it was pre the guidance or post the guidance, to have more guidance on what this means for the overall community, and whether the government really thinks that pushing companies toward this is ideal, so they're not coming to you saying, why is everybody in my system, and filing a bunch of lawsuits.
Right. So we've not been, to my knowledge, approached directly by any companies. That is not necessarily bad news for us, because part of what we need to do is get guidance out to the world and have them consume it, from our website where it's available. If you do a web search for DOJ Cybersecurity Unit, you will find the Vulnerability Disclosure Framework. The model of going out and addressing people and urging them, individually to adopt a program doesn't scale very well. And so, the goal is to get out guidance, have people consume it, and have sort of what seems to be a natural momentum for people to look at these, decide whether it fits for their type of organization, adopt them, and maybe garner greater comfort as these programs proliferate and are done successfully without large incidents.
So, Casey and Martin, I would love to hear a little bit more about how your model is growing within your customer base, because there are just a number of companies that are dealing with the cybersecurity workforce shortage. And let's just talk about Equifax, for instance. I'm sure they would love to have a disclosure for Apache Struts in their system.
Do we call bingo now?
So, I would love to hear what you've been hearing as your model grows from companies, especially in regards to the workforce shortage that we've been dealing with.
Yes, certainly. So from my perspective, that's literally the reason I started the company. I came out of running a pen testing firm in Sydney, Australia, and was really looking at a combination of the fact that one person with a single set of skills being paid by the hour is never going to be able to outsmart a crowd of potential adversaries with lots of different skill sets, lots of different motivations, and really a results-based incentive. And then, as you mentioned, the workforce shortage that we have in the cybersecurity industry right now. So there's this incredible latent talent pool and this incredible demand. What I wanted to do was actually step into the middle of that and connect the two together. From a trend standpoint, this really started off and got kicked off by Google, Facebook, some of the more progressive technology companies. But really what we've seen over the past now 4.5 years is it's kind of jumped out of the crazy tech company sandbox and into the more traditional corporations, more traditional companies. You see government agencies like the Hack the Pentagon Project and others that are adopting this model both here and around the world. And really what it's doing is it's transitioning from being something that's novel and innovative into something that's actually necessary and almost being taken for granted now as we go forward.
Martin, I imagine the Hack the Pentagon project has been, a great way for companies to go, well, maybe we should consider this if the Department of Defense is considering how to do this.
There was a huge shift when they came to us and said, could you run a program for us? And would it be okay to call it Hack the Pentagon? And it's difficult to imagine even afterwards what a pioneering act of courage it was to start the program. It has been successful beyond any dreams and expectations, and the return on investment is enormous for the Pentagon. And after that, we ran Hack the Army. In Hack the Pentagon, we found the first vulnerability in 13 minutes. In Hack the Army, it took us 8 minutes. We just concluded Hack the Air Force this summer, and we filed the first report in 1 minute. The best hacker in that program was 17-year-old Jack Cable, who filed 30 valid vulnerabilities with the Air Force. So this just shows how amazingly successful it is. And it's great for organizations because it doesn't take much headcount to operate. You do have to fix your bugs yourself, so that's work you can never outsource. But everything else can be handled by the platform that does it for you. But when we talk about the shortage of staff, we must also know that even the most well-staffed companies in the world, take Google, they can hire any cybersecurity expert they would like, and they do. They run bug bounty programs because the power of the bug bounty program and hacker-powered security in general is the diversity and the fact that they are unbiased, they know no limits, they will try everything. They are much more innovative than anybody who is employed by the organization, because the moment you get a salary from somebody, you have ownership bias, you have a lot of biases, you stop seeing the typos in your own text. But the external world will find them. So the external experts don't have to be any smarter than you are, and many times they aren't. They're just paid only when they find something and they know of no bias. They have the diversity and creativity in their mind. That's why it's such a powerful model.
So between what we've seen with the CFAA and how the DOJ has applied that to modern technology, with what you gentlemen are doing with your bug bounty programs, and now last week there was a bill introduced, that the active cyber defense bill, where it would give companies the narrow focus in order to what is being called hack back, basically beacon into a system and watch what data is moving through. I'm wondering if that bill, if it is to become law, whether that strikes a balance with how we are approaching cybersecurity moving forward, whether the DOJ thinks that we have all assets covered, and whether you two gentlemen think organizations would be open to all of that under an entire umbrella when it comes to cybersecurity.
Well, so we know that you can't have a cyber event without talking about hackback or active defense somewhere. On the Active Cyber Defense Certainty Act, I mean, the department does not have a position on the bill yet, but I would say that I think the Criminal Division commends Representative Graves for doing the hard work of taking this discussion that's existed for many years and actually producing legislative text. And I think what we'll see in the discussions around it is what the difficulty is in laying out this sort of authority alongside the potential harms that could result. And we look forward to kind of thinking about that and trying to figure out with others what that balance looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that this is being discussed is symptomatic of the need in the market to get more creative about how we're able to defend ourselves. You look at the cadence of breaches and the news around them. Cybersecurity's gone from being something that I think security professionals had to spend a lot of time convincing the market to care about, to something that there's a lot of heat under the pot now at this point. My concern and my thought about hackback is just around the potential blurring of the lines. When you look at sort of the evolution of how people think when it comes to interacting with the white hat hacker community, we've gone from a conversation that didn't happen to a conversation that we're now seeing happen very frequently. And there's been evolution of the interpretation of law, evolution of law itself. And it's really revolved around the idea that these people are helping us actually defend. They're doing defensive work as opposed to offensive work when they're hacking back. So that raises a bit of a red flag for me, but I think as long as we're measured about how we approach it, it shouldn't be a problem.
I believe that hacking back has its justified role in certain situations. But the real problem we're dealing with is an asymmetric threat. And if it's asymmetric, there is nothing to hack back at. There are very few cases where there's somebody or something to hack back at. So it won't have a dramatic positive effect in the industry. Instead, when you face asymmetric threats, which mankind has done for thousands of years, you pool your defenses, and that's how you turn around the asymmetry and create more defensive power than any black hat or criminal community or any adversaries can ever create. So the real solution is in pooling the defense, sharing vulnerability information across every company so that when you get hacked, you tell all your friends, meaning all the other organizations, to look for the same vulnerability immediately. That's a much more powerful solution than hacking back, which is just a small.
So I'm kind of want to build off something Casey said. Martin, do you think that there is the concern if this bill is to become law that we are, like there's going to be mission creep in where it's going to become more broad, and then you're going to have companies waging cyber war on their own? I mean, that's a frightening prospect to have companies that are out there causing problems just for governments and nation states across the world.
Well, of course, every time when you stipulate laws and you pass laws, you have to be very careful on the borderlines, how they can be abused. But that applies to any law, and that's why we have elected such great people here into the nation's capital to work on the laws and make sure they are well written. So, but I don't see the danger with hackback being any bigger than any other law that is being passed and where there's a risk of loopholes and things they didn't think of. And then you upgrade them like we've done already with some of the previous laws, and they've been modified when we learned that they're not working. So I don't think the fear of abuse of a law should stop us from passing a law. We must have the sort of societal courage to move forward, even though there could be some borderline case where things go wrong.
Great. Well, I know you three gentlemen will be at the forefront as these laws evolve and as cybersecurity continues to evolve, and we look forward to seeing what you guys all do in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.